Hello, welcome to Unstuck by Nicole. This is the first episode I've ever recorded, which feels both very exciting and slightly terrifying. For years, people have said something to me that I've always found quite funny. I just wish I had you in my pocket. Now, whether it is in coaching, through leadership conversations, business challenges, or navigating personal life transitions, what they were really saying to me was, I wish I could borrow your perspective when I'm stuck. So that's what this podcast is, a little piece of perspective in your pocket. Now, each week I'll share observations, insights, and practical tools to help you think differently, lead differently, and hopefully get unstuck from whatever is keeping you where you are. And today I want to talk about something I've noticed in both my clients and in myself. And that is that sometimes our greatest strength becomes our biggest liability. One of the things I've noticed over the years is that people spend a lot of time trying to improve their weaknesses. We take courses, we hire coaches, we read books, we create ongoing development plans, and we invest a tremendous amount of money in doing this. And whilst weaknesses absolutely deserve attention, I have personally found that many of the challenges I've seen in people aren't actually experienced or caused by their weaknesses at all. They're in fact caused by strengths that have become overused. I see it repeatedly with leaders, business owners, and high performers. It could show up as that leader who over-delivers, the person who takes responsibility for everything in and out of their personal and professional life, the helper, the fixer, the problem solver, the empath, and the organizer. Now, these qualities make people incredibly successful, but they're also often the same qualities that eventually leave them feeling exhausted. What is that one thing that people always come to you for? Now, for me personally, the answer was actually pretty obvious. For most of my life, if there was a problem in the room, I would solve it. If somebody needed help, I would help them. If they needed something organising, I would organise it and I would do it very, very well. I was the planner, the arranger, the executor, the person making things happen behind the scenes. And if I'm honest, I was really, really good at it and I actually liked it. People could rely on me. They could trust me. They know that I would show up for them. They would come to me when they needed support, ideas, or solutions. And at the time, I saw this entirely as a strength. But what I didn't realise was that somewhere along the way, helping had become part of my core identity. I wasn't always helping because I consciously chose to. I was sometimes helping because I didn't know how not to. Now, this showed up for me in my career. It showed up for me in my leadership. It showed up for me in relationships. In particular, one relationship where I spent years and years focusing on somebody else's needs while entirely neglecting my own. And I genuinely believed that because I could help people, I should help people. Because I could see a solution that I should actually provide that solution. And because I could support, I should carry. I knew I had the ability to make people feel safe and calm. And I felt like it was my job to fulfill that. But what I didn't understand then was that helping and carrying are not always the same thing. And the distinction between helping and carrying has honestly changed everything for me. I realised that helping creates growth in self and the people that you're helping, but carrying creates a dependency which can become quite heavy. Helping says, I believe that you're capable. Carrying says, I'll take the responsibility for this. Helping empowers people, carrying absorbs energy. And helping can leave both parties feeling stronger, but the carrying can often leave one person absolutely exhausted. And the difficult part is that carrying can look incredibly noble. It can look more like a kindness, a form of support, you being generous with your time, your energy, even your money. It can even be perceived as really great leadership. But often it's something else. It's over responsibility. And over time, over responsibility comes with a cost. And this is where I'd encourage you to think about your own lives. Where are you helping versus where are you carrying? Where have you stepped into responsibilities that do not actually belong to you? And this is something I actually see constantly with leaders and professionals. Leaders who are frustrated that their teams don't take ownership, business owners who feel overwhelmed, people who feel like they're carrying the entire business on their shoulders. Often they're incredibly capable, but they're also unintentionally creating some of the behaviours that they're actually frustrated by. If you consistently solve every problem, people around you will stop solving them. And if you carry every responsibility, people will stop carrying the responsibilities themselves. And if you rescue every single challenge, people will stop growing through them. Now, one of the hardest lessons in leadership is recognizing that helping somebody isn't always the same as developing them. Sometimes the most supportive thing you can do is to actually take a step back, allow people and teams to lean into discomfort, move forward into ownership, and actually grow. Now, one of the biggest things that I personally learned was that my body was reading this in me before I was even able to consciously be aware of it. Looking back, my body knew that something wasn't working long before I did. There was this sense of constant tension. I would feel it in my jaw, in my neck. It was ongoing hypervigilance, a constant feeling of responsibility. I was always preparing and bracing for that next problem, which most of the time the problems weren't my own. I was trying to get energy for those next conversations because I didn't know how much energy those conversations were going to use. And I always was thinking about that next thing that I might need to fix. Now, at the time, honestly, I thought it was ambition, drive. It was this kind of being a high performer. But now I understand it differently. My body was carrying the weight of responsibilities I had never put down. It was speaking to me, but I just did not understand the language yet. It wasn't until I was forced to slow down that I actually finally saw the pattern. And it was a phase where there was no work, there was no constant movement, there was no traveling, there was no endless doing. And during that phase, everything surfaced for me. And it was for the first time in my life that I realized how much I had been carrying for years. I'd love to leave you with a few questions for you to reflect upon and to consider, where are you carrying? I'd love you to think about, what is your greatest strength? What is that one thing that people always rely on you for? And how has that strength served you over your entire life? I'm sure it's helped you create success, connection, and impact. But I also imagine there may be times when that strength has become a source of frustration, exhaustion, or limitation. And where have you forgotten that this is actually supposed to be a choice? Because your strengths are a gift. The goal is not to lose them. The goal is to know when to use them. So before we finish, I'd love for you to consider one final question. That strength that people value most about you. When was the last time you asked whether you're consciously choosing to use it, or whether it's simply become part of who you think you need to be? Your strengths are not the problem. The challenge comes when they stop being something you consciously choose and start becoming something you feel responsible for doing all the time. The goal is not to lose your superpower. The goal is to know when to use it, when to rest it, and ultimately when to put it down. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe, share it with somebody who might need to hear it, and you can check out the companion journal post where I explore this idea in a bit more depth. But until next time, this is Unstuck by Nicole, a little bit of perspective in your pocket, and I will see you next time.